You're listening to Development Works, produced by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. Hello friends, I'm Andrew Wilson.
And I'm Michael Carlson. This is Development Works for March 2017.
And on today's upcast, when doing international development, running a charity is nothing but a business.
We hear from Narmin Ismail, the founder of the Spark of Hope Foundation.
Now, Narmin Ismail is a seasoned leader with a passion for making a difference in the world. So it's no surprise that in 2014, she became the founding president and CEO of the Spark of Hope Foundation, dedicated to empowering young women through education, primarily in the developing world. In just 3 years, the foundation supports over 75 students at the bachelor's, master's, and professional and PhD levels. Today on the Upcast, Narmin lets us know what works in international development.
But first, this Upcast is powered by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. We're a Canadian charity that sponsors the medical education of high-potential youth in rural Nicaragua. If you want to ensure everyone has access to quality healthcare, first visit doctorsfordoctors.ca.
Development work is very similar to business. Funding resources is another thing that I was so sure when I started that we were going to get our endowment in place. In fact, when I went around the country, people were saying the right things, and I said, yes, I'm going to come back. And I told the board members, yes, we've got our funding in place. Sure, this person has said they will support, but of course I didn't put anything in writing. And again, they were enthralled with the idea, but because we weren't a registered charity, we didn't have product, we didn't have any students in need yet. It's a basic management principle. So don't think development work is anything different than running a business. I think that's what I'll take away from it as well. I would have done, thinking back, I would have done a SWOT analysis before I started. But I'm learning that it's coming instinctively, and it's coming through the lessons that I'm learning. Each event or each incident that comes up makes me think I should have done that before. But you don't think about such things in international development. You don't think about it in any development because it's not supposed to be a business, right? You're not there to make profit, so your profit is the good work that you do. Those are the credits that you get. You have to make sure you know your risks. You have to make sure you know what's in front of you. What is the product you're selling? It might be a service that you're selling, or it might be a physical product, or it could be something that you're delivering. Whatever it is, make sure you treat the development project as a business. There has to be accountability. There has to be transparency. And you have to see what you're getting at the end. You can't just keep giving, and then, and I know I faced it myself. I was going all out 24 hours because I was dealing with the other part of the world, 24/7, that I got myself ill. You can't afford to do that. You have to make sure that you do it in stride. And I know some of you are nodding your heads because we've faced that. You can't just keep giving. You've got to look after yourself in order to make sure you give out the best you can.
So I think anyone who's worked in nonprofit knows all too well the overcommitments of funders, right?
So many overcommitments. I think it's actually called fat wallet syndrome from funders. And it turns out that the only thing making your wallet fat is old crumpled receipts.
Got to keep those receipts.
Maybe stamps that you're keeping.
So for me and Doctors for Doctors, Mike was actually the first person to come along and really sit me down and make me think of it as a business.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, until then I was mostly just some crazy 20-year-old guy trying to go around and help people like an idiot. So that was really good wisdom from Narmin on that. And thank you, Mike.
You helpful idiot, you. That's actually the title of Andrew's memoirs. Look forward to them coming out in about 50 years.
I actually just started writing them this weekend.
That's lovely.
And next up, here's Narmin talking about her scholarship program at the Spark of Hope with young women. So she sponsors women from all around the world and often puts them in very big schools abroad, some of the best institutions in the world, and most of these schools are outside of their homes.
So in her next segment here, Narmin goes deep into the wonderful aspects of sponsoring female students internationally, but She also makes it very clear that the skies are not always blue, Andrew. The roses aren't always red.
No, they're not.
It's whatever other analogy for things with colors that aren't supposed to be there you want to use here. Sometimes stuff just isn't working out the way you want.
Yeah, and there's a lot in the next few minutes here, so we just wanted to extend the story a bit.
So take it away here, Narmin.
I wouldn't say we discriminate. We prefer them to know what they want in life. But if, for example, we've got two master's students in Canada right now, if something happens to them, what happens? I don't know. It's not an easy one. They're both singles. The women that we work with are very, very determined. They're leaders. They're tomorrow's leaders. They're the ones who are going to make a difference into the countries from which they come. So we're quite careful to make sure that they have the passion to make a difference first. So it's not just anybody and I'm sure your students are the same. When you get them from the rural areas, take them to Managua, get them an education, they're going back to their areas. They're making that difference there. But what if that student changes her mind and does not want to go back? Will you stop it? No, you can't. But you just make sure that the education that she's got is going to be tailored towards giving back. It's all about giving back, and I think we're all here to give back. So long as you can do that, then. And it's the same with the students that when we find the students or when we select the students, the final decision of who gets the scholarship is the universities. But when the students go out to a different country and with the intention of coming back and then decide that they want to stay in the country that they went to, especially if it's a developed country, you can't really stop it. But you hope that where they decide to live, they're going to give back to their families. The tie to the family is always there. They always want to give back. So even if somebody comes to Canada and decides, they want to stay in Canada, that was not the original intention, but you hope that when the student is in the workforce, she's going to be able to help her family back home and help her community. And we all have our own roots. I mean, all of us, when we're talking about our countries of origin, our eyes lit up when we said, we want to help someone, and it's innate in everyone. You just need to help. There still is a lot of cultural and traditional values. Yes, in fact I heard even now that some of the students that had gone away from these repressed societies, I'm going to say, and came back. And it says a simple thing like the female student coming back and riding a bicycle in the village was seen as a no-no. And that would have been her mode of transportation where she went, outside the country. And she was seen as a radical when she came back because that's not done. It's not like she, if there was a particular dress that they were used to, that she was violating and I'm putting it in quotes because, again, what are traditional norms? It's things that we've imposed ourselves. It's not faith. It's not religion. We had a student who graduated, and then I was going to help her out with her master's. Helped her out at the end of her undergrad, and then helped her out with her master's. She decided she wanted to get married and didn't expect to have a child that quickly, but she did. So what do I do? Should I help her or should I not help her? And so we left it open to her to see what her husband thought about it, and he was determined to get her a master's. So we're still working on it to see what we can do, and he was very, very supportive of her doing her master's. And so you have to, it's almost like an individual basis, you evaluate on an individual basis. If you think of a female going to dental school, you've given up a lot to make it through to that point. And she was in her second year of dental school, And this volunteer was talking to her, and she was, commenting on her and giving her credit for what she had accomplished. And says, well, I don't know. I guess it's not important anymore. And she asked why. She says, well, I'm going to get married and my husband's family is not going to allow me to work. So there really isn't any point in me finishing off my degree. And I'm thinking, what a sad case that all that education and all that determination she had went down the drain. And so I don't know. It happens. It hasn't happened to us yet. So, but I know it. But I think more and more. So I'm seeing more and more of a stronger woman like that saying, "That's okay. I'm still going to make it." I'm seeing that change slowly coming through. It varies by the university and the program that they go for. So, for example, when we help the students from the northern areas of Pakistan go down to Karachi, right. So this is from the Hunza and the mountainous areas, go down to Karachi, and they went in for their masters in education. They were going for their masters so that they could come back to their villages to become master teachers and heads of school, and their impact to young students was immeasurable. Mm-hmm. They've just gone back, and some of them have. I don't know whether we'd be able to measure it, but for them to say, okay, I'm a leader and I'm willing to be a school principal, it just shows the women in those areas that if so and so can do it, then I can do it too. Mm-hmm. So the role modeling of those teachers, of those master's level students, is huge. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who are encouraging young females to go to school now, to say it's okay, if I went through it, you can too. Mm-hmm. So it's changing the whole nature of what education means in those areas. Mm-hmm. So we needed to make sure, and that's what we do as well, if there's the students who come from cultures, and in most of the Middle East, come from cultures that don't allow students to go out of their villages, let alone their own cities or countries. Mm-hmm. We've had to make sure that the parents are completely on board first. Mm-hmm. So if the parent doesn't support the student going in for education, then you can't move forward. But slowly that's changing as well, because people are seeing that when their children, especially their daughters, are getting educated, then their own lives are changing. The daughters' lives are changing in the future, and so I've been pleasantly surprised by the number of parents who are saying, "My daughter's going to become somebody."
There is so much there.
I know, right?
That last piece that Narmin mentions is beautiful. My daughter is going to become somebody. And you can just totally see the families of these high potential young women believing so much in their daughters.
Yeah, and the tie to family and traditional values is always there. And it's definitely true that from what I've seen, sometimes for the better, in the sense that it helps people come home after going away to school to get a higher education.
For sure.
But sometimes for the worse, right? When it restricts them from working in their degree because it's not culturally acceptable in their community.
That's got to be hard. It's clearly something that I take for granted, that my partner or family would encourage me to learn and pursue my career. But clearly that isn't the case really anywhere in the world, isn't free of that. It just reminds me how much work we have to do to support women's rights all around the world, including right here in Canada.
Yeah, and also I really connect with Narmin when she talks about evaluating the situation on an individual basis. So I've often seen large policies get in the way of doing what's right. And it's important when you're influencing people's entire lives to maintain the flexibility in an organization. And it may not look the best, but it's always what's right.
Right, and the tension between looking the best and then knowing what's right. My involvement with nonprofit work has constantly made me question that balance. It's that higher level planning management piece versus the on-the-ground implementation, and it's super hard.
Yeah, always something to reflect on and try to get right. And I think at the end of the day, we do the best we can, and we try to minimize the gap between those as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And it was also interesting to hear Narmin speak about the positives about bringing students outside of their local communities and the importance of parental support. And at Doctors for Doctors, we really emphasize that students stay in their home countries to go to school, and Narmin does the opposite at times, sending students abroad to bigger and better schools overseas.
Places like Harvard or Stanford, whatever it might be, we don't do that at DFD.
No. And when I reflect on this, it's important to note that she's working in countries that are unsafe for many students. And I think it's really easy for us to sit back and say, we should always keep our students local because then, they have a higher return rate to their communities or something like that. And it's easy to sit back and say, local, local, local. It's essential to keep them local. But I think anyone who would have to go to school in an unsafe country might see it differently.
It's going to be a really different conversation, right? If I was a PhD candidate in Syria right now, let's say.
Yeah, versus Nicaragua, and the country's safe, and that's
which
okay.
is safe.
Yeah.
So, in this last story here, Narmin talks about working particularly with universities and other similar institutions.
And there's definitely a surprising story in here, so let's listen in.
Because now I could say I'm working with a university in Bangladesh and I'm working with a university at the University of Bern, that led to other universities now seeing the credibility of the organization. Once you get that little bit of credibility, then other partners come on. So that's what works, that you have to make sure that your credibility is there. You have to be transparent with all your work. You can't say something and do something else. I've seen that happen many times. You don't say you're going to support a student and then take back some student support. Word gets around. You don't want to do that. The other one was we had a partnership with the University of Bern, and this came up because I had a colleague who was working at the University of Bern, and when she heard about this, she says, well, why don't you partner with University of Bern? And I said, sure, and how would I make this work? She says, well, we'll make it work. So she became our on-ground partner as well as a beneficiary. So they recommended a student where, even though she was getting a partial scholarship, because she was expecting a second child, her scholarship did not allow for the 4 months that they thought she would not be working on her thesis. So that's why they came to me. So there's a lot of side benefits that come through, and I wasn't expecting it, but it came through because they knew of the work we were doing. What does not work, or what did not work, we had a partnership with a university in Canada, and that was going to lead to many hundreds of students being helped from the international world. We still have one student there, but the university came up and said, we'd like to partner with you, but we want to make sure that it's all fine and done. And I had legal department come back and say, this is reverse discrimination. I've never heard of that before, of discriminating against men. I mean, men have all the opportunities they can get, especially in the education field, all around the world. And I was being told we're discriminating against men. So we're getting that rectified, but it's something that you've got to be aware of. I mean, we had the project on the table, and it got pulled out because of this little glitch that came on. It's $1 million project, and things happen. So I didn't know how to respond first because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I think it came in from a point where we give a lot of emphasis to gender equality. And here was a situation where we're saying, okay, it's not gender equality, it's the balance is a little the other way. And I think that's where they were coming from, is that it wasn't equality. It was, we were giving preference to females going in for education rather than making it a level playing field. And what I came up with, I said, it's not a level playing field in the first place. So what I'm trying to do is make it as balanced as possible. And I think that's where the discussions will go now. So it was, as I said, it just floored me when I heard that, because it's not a level playing field right now. Even in Canada, it's not. So.
Now, I've never worked directly with a university as a partner in development work, but if they have such high levels of scrutiny when it comes to negotiating those partnerships, I don't know if it's actually worth it to partner with them.
Andrew, I'm going to interrupt you, as I do so often on this podcast, to have just a really important point. We got to lay out some stuff about reverse discrimination against men.
Yeah, let's hit this.
First of all, it's not a thing. But for those that might think this is a thing, this reverse discrimination against men, you might think all sorts of things. You might think that maybe all people are equal now. Men and women are all equal, and that therefore we shouldn't disadvantage men because we're on the same platform. But basically, when you look at all the metrics worldwide, take any metric at all, just put up on a dartboard and throw a dart at it, pick any metric, it'll show that women are at a disadvantage in some way. And just because Hillary almost became president doesn't erase the numbers. We're not on equal footing yet, period. Second, you might think that unequal treatment of people is unfair. And we've all heard that, right? Since kindergarten. You might think that this reverse discrimination against men would be unfair because we're treating people differently. But then, if the system is unequal, how do we change anything at all by applying the same sort of principles universally? So if these forces to change the system don't take into account that they are inequitable. So let me break it down in a really simple analogy. Let's say you're driving a car and then you get a flat tire. Is the solution in this inequitable system, this is off balance, to put 20 psi to put the same amount of air in both tires and treat them equally? No. You give each tire the pressure it needs to be the best tire it can be. And that drifted a little bit in that analogy at the end, but I think it drives the point home. So thank you for indulging me in this. Reverse discrimination against men is not a thing, and back to your regular scheduled program here.
There's a lot of pointing fingers when Mike was saying that. I could feel his passion almost in my eye.
Points.
So Narmin and the Spark of Hope Foundation, they do really good work internationally and here at home in Canada too. So she came out and gave us some really important perspectives on her work, and I think what the audience liked about her most was that we could feel the passion behind the work that she does. So for her to come out and share that in such an intimate setting, it was great. Thank you very much, Narmin.
So for all our listeners, if you want to hear everything that Narmin said in her live interview with us, you can find the extended version of this upcast on our website, doctorsfordoctors.ca, under the Development Works tab. Our Canadian charity strives to do the best international development work possible. And as we continue to learn, we are sharing all our learnings with you.
And we would love to hear from you too. So drop us a line on our website and find out where you can see our next event live.
Now, updates for the month.
In Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses this month, our 3 medical students in Nicaragua, that's Brian, Kimberly, and Brandon, are doing well. In fact, we actually just heard from Brandon that he got one of the highest marks in his epidemiology class.
Well done, Brandon. We're also hiring up a storm in DFD-NFN thanks to our HR manager, Mel. Very special shout out to her, who's doing an incredible job staying on top of postings and interviews. And remember, if you or someone that you know is looking to volunteer and make a difference in people's lives, please reach out to us when you have a minute.
Now, Amanda and Mike Cohen have also brought on a team of legal directors, and they're getting set up to help us answer a bunch of questions there.
And Will over in Grants has been working hard, and we are almost set up on Google for Nonprofits. It's a free platform for nonprofits like us, and we highly recommend that.
So if you're a charity looking for a free platform, that is definitely something to look into. And finally, at the Campbell Webster Foundation, our previous funder, they've decided to move their targeted funding to our medical students. So thank you very much for supporting our programs in Nicaragua.
Well, that does it for this month's update on Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. Anything else, Andrew?
Yeah, let's hand it back over to Narmin to remind us why we fight for women's rights.
Not enough of us. I just heard this afternoon, that if you're sitting back and not doing something about something that bothers you, then you're giving your right to make a difference up. So, if you don't speak up about equality and women's rights, and if you see all the silly things that are going on around the world, things are beginning to change. Women are saying no more. When we had this case in Kenya where the young girls who, I think it was a case against the government saying you did not protect us. Things are happening. Things are happening.
And that's everything for this month's episode of Development Works. Thanks for listening.
This is Andrew and Mike signing off, and remember, if you don't make mistakes, you're not working on hard enough problems.